Everybody. Thanks so much for having me. Tucci, thanks you, of course, for the invite. I'm very, very glad to be here. Uh, I am a college kid, apparently, on behalf, of course, who interviews founders and creatives about their advice for the younger generation, more specifically, startup founders and people in the Silicon Valley space to democratize Silicon Valley for the younger generation. And so, my purpose of my content is to almost make Silicon Valley more accessible, make it so that anybody, whether you're an insider or outside of Silicon Valley, can understand what it actually takes to become a startup founder, wherever you are in your journey. And I've interviewed people all the way from Brian Kim, who's a lead partner at A16Z, to Vinay Hiramat, to Roy Lee, to CEO and incoming CEOs at um, possibly even like in the talks to work with like Robinhood and Glean as well in the future. So excited for all those and blessed to have those opportunities as well.
And so to jump right into our questions, what were the three main transitions in your life and what prompted these decisions? And when you decided to go through with them, how did you adapt to like all of the unexpected changes?
I think this is perfectly summarized by one quote because I'll give you a quote instead of an answer here. Every person, every man, every woman, whoever, realizes that they have two lives when they realize that they only have one life. And that what that means is that like you go through transition when you recognize that you have only one life to live and you have to live it to the fullest extent to do whatever you want, whether it be dating the chillest guy in the world, whether that be pursuing the dreams that you want to pursue, whether that be giving back to the people you love. Everyone has that innate desire, and I recognize that. I think I recognize that I only had one life to live around 2020, around the pandemic, when it first started, at least. Many, many, many years ago. I'm pretty old. I'm 21, so I'm pretty much. I have gray hairs now. Um, but more importantly to that, I recognize also the value in doing things that seem hard in the beginning, but recognizing the value of doing them later down the line, and recognizing that, especially this one quote where if you were to die tomorrow, what would be the one piece of advice that you want to leave the world, or one thing that you want to leave the world? And for me, I'd want to be remembered for the things that I worked on, things that I cared about, but also I want to be remembered for the things that I enjoyed doing and build something greater than myself. And once I recognized that my goal was to build something greater than myself that outlives the concept of myself, whether it be a cause, a platform, community, that's when I recognize that I have to start building towards something, getting off my lazy ass, and just putting everything I can to that one thing.
I think you read my mind because I was actually about to ask you at a later point in the interview if you and I were to die tomorrow, what advice would you leave the younger generation? And
Oh, that's a good question.
I think you just
I
summed
actually say that. I say that in my videos.
Oh, really?
Me and you can't make me. No, I'm sorry.
I don't know, maybe I am.
Hmm.
You know, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. I think you have a
Feel like an artist.
interesting style of content. So, how did you choose your form of content? Because when it comes to interviews, there are generally two extremes. There are short form, very like intense, fast-paced interviews that you do that are like typically done standing up, like in context. And then there are interviews that are very long form that are done in a studio for hours on end. So how did you debate the pros and cons um, of each form, if you did? And what led you to choose and to stick with your current format?
Yeah, really good question. I think that when I look at bigger podcasts, like a good example is uh, No Barriers by Sarah Gao. And she's a very big podcaster. She's a very big in the VC space, like a celebrity. She recognized she goes to Blue Bottle. Like if I see her, I'm like, oh my God, that's Sarah Gao. I'm like getting hyped. I'm like, oh my God, that's the girl from Twitter. But I look at these podcasts that are longer form, that are a bit more lengthy, and they almost feel a bit gatekept because a lot of the terminology they use, a lot of the conversations they have, for someone who's an outsider of Silicon Valley, like a student or someone who's just getting into the space, they really won't really understand and gain a lot of value from the conversation because they don't understand these actual terms and these actual conversations that are being held. It's like you have to almost be in the space and know the lingo, which only people in Silicon Valley know, to actually gain value from these conversations. And so for me, like for someone who's just like completely new and knows nothing, how can I distill this information and still provide value to somebody in a way that anybody can understand that? And I think the one way that everyone can understand it is through short form content. And you see with short form content that the most interesting, the most impactful way to reach somebody is not by YouTube videos these days. It's by short form content that is optimized and optimized for a high ceiling for emotion and also a high ceiling for attention. Like people are drawn in every single second. It's hyper optimized, but that's how you can almost use an existing format, use an existing medium to create content that impacts people, that helps people, and still is able to provide a lot of value to people. And so it's like this like Venn diagram of there's a bunch of interesting pieces of content, but no one watches it because it's gatekept by this interesting knowledge. And there's a lot of really, really cool content that reaches a lot of people, but doesn't have a lot of value. And I feel like I'm in the middle of that where I have interesting and engaging content, but it's also fun and easy to digest, very digestible.
I think the Venn diagram is a beautiful way to visualize it. And
Mhm.
have you ever faced any moments where maybe your content was like veering too much to one side and like where it was becoming very like easy to go viral, but it wasn't spreading the message as well as you hoped it would, or where it had the right message, but it wasn't reaching the audience you wanted it to? And how did you adapt and fix your strategy if and when that happened?
Yeah, great question. I think there's been plenty of times when I'm like, okay, let me take a step back, think about what I'm making, and actually go from there. One great example of that was when I was interviewing a lot more creators that weren't necessarily the most well mannered to say. Creators who maybe created not the most like they created content that I personally not would not want to watch and content that like didn't really uplift people. It was more just entertaining content. And I feel like it reflected when the conversation that I had with them, where it felt more dry, but more almost transactional because I didn't really have much of a conversation to ask them and not actual genuine interest. And I feel like as an interviewer, you have to lead with curiosity. There's a quote by uh, I think there's a quote by Larry Page, the famous podcaster on CNN. If I got his name, yeah, Larry Page, where he says to be an amazing interviewer, you have to lead. You have to let curiosity take the wheel and lead with that. And I think the best interviewers I know I met interviewers at the BBC, I've met interviewers at CNN, like lead reporters, and they all say just like they just sit and humanize themselves in what the person is saying and lead themselves with that. Even if it doesn't feel as coherent, it still makes the most genuine, authentic responses that in turn produce the most valuable content for your audience. Not the most viral, not the most interesting, maybe not the most thought provoking, but the most personal and authentic. And I think that overarchingly matters the most in the long run as a creator because you build so much trust as you go on.
I think that's a good way to put it. And I guess when there is that medium of pursuing an authentic conversation with someone, but also trying to reach your greater goal of like the point of that conversation is, of course, to connect with that person, but also to share their knowledge with people who might not have access to a more direct form of the content. Have you observed other people, because you've interviewed a lot of creators, have you observed like the struggle between trying to have that authentic conversation, but also creating good content that accomplishes their mission? And did they pick a side? Or if they did, why? And if they somehow found a happy medium, how did they do it?
Yeah, great question. I think every single creator and their content is a reflection of their lifestyle. So if you have someone who's just like grinding, they're a hustler, they're trying to make it, they're trying to get it for their family, make a family name. They're gonna be creating more content around like motivation and self accomplishment and just like building things up. And even if they don't create that content as a person, maybe they create like gaming content or entertaining content, they're still trying to hustle. You'll see those elements come in somewhere in their community, either the way they respond to content, respond to comments. I mean, the way they help uplift their community, the way they even upload. You'll see those themes as go on as you see them on video and off video in the community. And I think the medium comes from one, of course, experimentation because no two creator journeys are going to be the same. No two channels should be the same. no two mediums should be the same. Like you should be experimenting and changing your content, but you also need to understand that like your content evolves, and just as you evolve, your content should evolve too, right? Like if I when I graduate, that's my graduate college, or when I graduate, um, I can't be making college content anymore. I have to evolve and I have to showcase my life and my journey, the people I interview, right? And so I think that is natural for a creator to take that leap because it's natural in their own life. At the end of the day, a creator is just a it's a parasocial relationship between you and another person, and that person will still progress in life no matter whatever you interact with that creator.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, do you ever feel like, I'm trying to think how to say this. Do you ever feel like you you undergo a change and like it doesn't fit with your image, like the image you've created online? And there's kind of a difference between who you feel that you are at that moment and the professional image of you. So like the Viraj I am in my home, like in when I'm not working, I guess. I'm sure you're working most of the time, but and the Viraj that people who haven't met you but who see your content see. And how do you reconcile those differences?
I think a lot more people think people are surprised by how more easygoing I am as a person. Like I'm very uh I think I'm very approachable. That's one. But people are also just like very hmm, how do people I don't actually know how people react to me. I think about that. Because I feel like as the interviewer, you're almost this medium for other people to share their advice and their platform and their journeys on. And so for me, as someone who's the middleman in this, it's very interesting for me to see how people interpret my presence. They obviously know that I'm like very high energy. I come in with a lot of intention, a lot of passion. I think a lot of people are surprised at like how where I am in my life, where I'm a bit younger. People assume I'm a bit older, because like I don't really showcase the fact that I am still a university student at the end of the day. Um, and I think the medium that you mentioned about having a balance between X and Y and finding the Z or finding the Zen to say, I think it comes from rather the idea that someone can build a piece of content, but at the end of the day, like content is still in some ways not gonna be 100% authentic to you as a person, because at the end of the day, social media is optimized for engagement and not for authenticity. If it was optimized for authenticity, you would not be seeing in the post you do right now, because the algorithm is optimized literally to find you the most engaging posts. And so you don't have to like almost understand the game, hate the game in some way if you don't like it, but keep going as a player in this game that is social media, and try to incorporate every single piece of authenticity, every single person piece of yourself, the best of your ability that you can, and understand like that you are still going to be interpreted. There's like a delta between you as a creator and you as a human being, and you want to ideally make that delta smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but you have to be okay with it increasing and that delta almost growing if you experiment more and you try to create different pieces of content that might initially not look as comfortable to you, but you get more accustomed to it as we go on.
You put it in very mathematical terms, I guess, like the
Yeah,
limit and goes to zero for any of our calculus or math lovers.
yeah. I said delta a lot, and it's like some people they get it and they think about like the airline. A lot of times it's like me thinking about the terms. And I interview a lot of tech folks, like tech jargon. Shout out AP Calc.
Yeah, I mean, even on my robotics team, I hear a lot of like, what are some pluses and what are some deltas for next meeting? So,
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. Shout out your robotics team. That's a good one.
yeah. So you mentioned about like your passion and like how you try to remain authentic. And earlier you talked about how you want to essentially distill very like high complex level of knowledge that takes years to understand and to acquire and distill it down to a level where like most people can understand and interact with it and then provide their own thoughts about it. And so like your mission, like verbatim, is to democratize the top 1% of Silicon Valley. And that's a very powerful mission, and it's a very ambitious mission. And what specific instances or like what pivotal moment in your own personal journey made you realize that like this was your mission, that this was your calling, and that's what you wanted to reach millions of people with your content?
Yeah. Yeah, go where you're putting the question. I think just the one fact that nobody else is doing it. Like who else is doing it? And there's such a gapping need for like when people come to SF, there's so many people who leave energized. They come to the city and they become a better version of themselves. But there's so many people who are yet to understand the true value of living in the best city in the world that is San Francisco, that is the Bay Area. And I think that distilling all the knowledge that comes from living in the city and the best entrepreneurs can show people the fact that, hey, it's possible for you to live here. It's possible for you to do great things here, regardless of who you are, where you came from, what your SAT score was, what GPA I got. Because I didn't have a great GPA, I didn't have a great SAT score. Um, but you can still do great things while you're here. And I think that's more of the personal mission that I have with this content. And as a person too, I try to show people that things are still possible regardless of where you are. And I think that's something that is like an ethos that I have in whatever content I do, regardless if it's like long form, short form, before I even start doing interviews, where that ethos has came from. Um, I think that if there's one message I want to share to the world, it's that SF in San Francisco, regardless of where you are in your life and what you're trying to achieve, is still the best thing in the world because there's so much to do here. Not so much to do, I want to say, so much to be learned here, so much to grow.
I guess I have two questions for you. So you love San Francisco and it is an entrepreneurial hub. And so what about San Francisco makes it like so vital and like such an incubator for innovative ideas? And then I'll ask the second question after you've answered this.
I think I honestly believe that the sheer amount of people are so much more willing to hear you and your passion out, and people are so much more open to seeing. People are also very interested in your story and why you did what you did. And I think that people also come here for the sole purpose of creating a company, but they also see how achievable it is. And so it almost to them shows them that this is possible. It's just that I need to do X, Y, and Z insane amount of hard work and dedication and grind, but it's still possible because I'm seeing other people all around me do these things and they're equally as dedicated as I am. I think there is no capita of high intensity, hardworking people that you will find in the world other than SF. And I think that's the most important thing. I also believe in energy and frequency and the fact that like you can find people who are so high energy and so interesting and so motivated, disciplined even. And it's like there's no other place in the world where you can meet somebody who has the same intensity and same level of aggression of work that you do. I also think the most important is the fact that there isn't much of I don't want to say there's much of a community, but there's also just much more of emphasis on making it and achieving things here. And I think that the city, because of nightlife, because of the food options, because the people that live here, is optimized literally for you to sit in your desk and sit in your room and just grind out all the time. I think it makes it so accessible for you to do that. Very, very weird and rigid bullet points, but like all those in unison make sense to me. It's like, yeah, this is the best.
No, that makes sense. I guess like just the logistics are often overlooked because they're really boring. And I think when we think about like spending time in travel or like sitting at your desk all day and still like being able to live your life because while you're like throwing yourself into your project and your passion is incredible. And I think you gave a very different take from like what I've seen on the internet about why people love San Francisco. Of course, like the people about there being like it's just a very concentrated area of like motivated, disciplined, ambitious individuals, but also like the physical aspects. And I don't hear about that very often, like if at all. So Thank you for
Yeah.
bringing. And my
Also, public transport.
that's true.
Yeah.
My other question, it's to a point you mentioned maybe a couple minutes ago about, I guess, so like I have a follow-up for that is, are we what we do? Like, is there a difference between our identity and our action, and how are they related?
I'm gonna wait for that person to go in the back. I'm gonna hear them.
No worries. I actually can't hear anything, but
You can't. Okay. There's like a lady with like a big trash can. Um, the delta between well, the distance between your action and your thoughts, I think is a huge thing. Like that mental distance. I think you can feel it whenever you do something. And I think that's the best way to ensure that you're doing exactly what you said you would do, whatever the words that you said, the actions that you said would are the exact same, is we're doing the most uncomfortable things. It's very common click down. People said, "Oh, be uncomfortable." What does that actually mean? It means literally the delta between your actions and your words. When Matt's delta example is the exact same because it's so hard to do. You can't even unravel the fact that you are so uncomfortable doing this, but you have to push through because that resistance, that sheer level of discomfort makes it so you feel more comfortable doing the uncomfortable thing. But that slowly edges you toward doing things that look uncomfortable and feel uncomfortable, but are the exact same action that you said you would do.
have you noticed a pattern in people who maybe like they embrace the uncomfortable, people who don't go looking for it, but they'll tolerate it and they'll adapt well, and people who avoid uncomfortable situations? And like, what do their lives and their lifestyles look like? What do their ambitions look like? And I guess for the people you've interviewed who are maybe in like a later stage of life, what do their outcome look like?
Yeah. I always think that there's this funny quote that I think about is that you can never pull a fast one on hard work. You can never shortcut hard work in your life. You'll always, hard work always shows up in your life at some point. It just becomes more inconvenient as you go on, right? Let's say you grind in high school and you get into a great college. Now you have the security of the fact that you can get a great job out of college because you had a great school. But for someone who didn't grind in college and was like didn't do well like I did and had to work their way up to get a great job or great job opportunities and then go to good school, I had to then still grind to say to get into a school, but at a later point in my life and then transfer. And so I don't think you can ever pull a fast one, but you just get the benefit of the outcome a lot sooner in your life. But at the same time, recognizing the fact that hard work and the results of hard work aggregate as you go on in your life. They stack. Like, Minecraft terms, you have the different potions they stack. Exact same thing here. If you apply a healing potion, you heal, and you take more damage, you lose that. But the person who has two healing potions will heal faster than you because they did twice the work of the healing potions. And so I think that like everyone has the same deck of cards in the beginning, different deck of cards, but they have a different capacity for hard work. And to answer the second part of your question, when it comes to outcomes and older people as I've interviewed, I've seen that people who are still successful, who still make it, have some sort of epiphany moment in their life where they recognize the fact, either when they're younger, they're older, when they see somebody who's doing well that used to be doing horrible in their life, uh, now seem to make it. I talked to an entrepreneur today who spent over a decade talking about the fact that he wanted to create miniature EV trucks in San Francisco. And he spent over a decade talking to his wife, saying the same, the same, the same. And then he was like, you either shit on Twitter or you get out, which is a very crude way of saying it, but it's like you either like do the thing or you don't. And you have to do it at some point. And for him, he could have made that company when he was 21. He chose to make it when he was in his 30s, but he still had to make that decision to do it. I think ambitious people don't ever lose their ambition. I think they do lose their ambition as they get older, but there are people who are almost are given a certain level of ambition in their life and they end up using that ambition to build something at some point in their life, either when they're younger or older. Because at some point in your life, you end up like losing that ambition and spark. And everyone has a different number, a different level of ambition, but they still end up using that ambition to some extent. For example, a great one is a Steve Wonder. He's always in building companies.
So I guess in terms of our capacity for hard work and our capacity for ambition and like when the capacity for ambition and the drive runs out, do you think like for for some people who we think are very conventionally like successful who would fit like almost all the check boxes, like to put it in a pretty bland way, um, does their ambition run at like kind of a medium level, but very consistently, or is it short intervals, but like very high
Mm.
spikes? So is it a marathon or is it a sprint? Or
It's a
does
marathon.
oh really?
It's a marathon. I'll tell you why I think it's a marathon. Because there are people that just have higher agency than other people. There's people who will just do more, right? There's some people who will never in their life want to be an investment maker. But there's also like investment makers who will do investment making and retire because it gives them good money. There's also people who are investment makers and go on to create companies, right? They have a lot of different mission. And so there's like different levels of this agency that people get. And some people can do like a 40-hour a week, not a 40-hour a week job. Nothing wrong with that. But there's different capacity between someone who's working 40 hours a week and someone who's working 100 hours a week in investment banking. And so I think there's like different levels of agency, but everyone has over a longer lifetime a set allotment of like maybe 10 years, like 10 years of your life. They have a set allotment of agency that will either increase as you get older or decrease as you get older. Right? My agency from 10 to 20 was not as high as it hopefully will be from 21 to 30 or 31. I guess in that example. Because I'll I've also learned the lessons that I've learned from 10 to 20, but I also will develop skill sets and most importantly, reasons to work as hard as I do, hopefully, as I get older. Or maybe I'll achieve what I want to achieve. And I'm like, okay, I'm done.
Do you have any hopes or anything that like if you could time travel in the future and tell yourself at 31, what would you tell Viraj at 31?
I always ask this to myself, like, what if I were to die? So what would I want to be doing? And if I were to be doing this, would the 8-year-old version of myself and the 80-year-old version of myself appreciate me for doing this? I think the 8-year-old version of myself would love me because I've been making content since I was 8. The 80-year-old version of me, I don't know him yet. Hopefully, he's around them. I hope he is. Um, but I think he will most definitely appreciate that I did not take any second chances on myself, especially as I go older, and do the thing that I love, regardless of how hard it was and how hard I had to work. Because I think I almost am a person who enjoys hard work, and I think I just have to just recognize the fact that the ceiling for hard work for myself will increase as I go on, and I guess as I get older. And that's just like I legit just have to just work harder. That's how it is. But I also have to be more kinder. I have to be more uncomfortable. I have to be more in all the ways that I want to be more. And that's it.
It's a very philosophical, but also very accessible way to put it. I think even throughout our conversation, which is long form content, you've distilled like things that could be explained in very technical, very complex terms into very accessible, like easily understandable terms, but they still retain their meaning. And like that's so impressive. So
Thank you.
yeah.
I try to use less deltas as I go on. 'Cause I recognize that like, you know, delta I recognize maybe I should just say like gap, but we have that thing in mind.
I think we understand Delta.
Yeah.
So I guess like my question for you is you've interviewed like really extraordinary people and you've interviewed people from a variety of different backgrounds, from walks of life with different goals and different outcomes. And so when you prepare to interview someone, like or even before when you reach out to them, like to schedule an interview or to like see if they'd be open to it, what makes you think that like that person's story needs to be heard or like this message needs to be shared? And beyond conventional measures of success, like what do you look for?
I look for a struggle. I look for the unconventionalists because no two founder stories are the same. I also look for the one thing that all of us have, which is humanity, and I want to see how they look at their humanity. For example, there was this girl I talked to who she built her first company at 15. At that same age at 15, she was also told by her teacher that she would never amount to anything. Or her mother, she was told by her mother was told by her teacher that she would never amount to anything. And that same year, she created a software for a local hospital that paid for, I think, everyone's medical bills, I think. But like she did something in such a contrasted way in the exact same age that a teacher told her she didn't amount to anything. And she graduated. She went to state school, top 100, 200 school in the United States. She had the lower SAT score than like anyone thought she had. She had a low GPA, but she had obsession and drive towards something that nobody else had where she grew up. And that's the most important thing. She had a mission that she knew she had to execute on. Almost like God gave her this mission that nobody else had. I think that's the most important thing I look for is just sheer delusion. Like how crazy you gotta be to do this thing, but they did it. There's a guy that I met also same day. He got rejected from Y Combinator 6 times. He got in on his seventh try, but he kept applying every single time. This guy is also 33. And so the typical Y Combinator founder age is about 20 to 21. This guy is 13 years older than the average Y Combinator founder and already had a very successful life beforehand. He was on track to be an early partner at BCG, making millions of dollars by 26, 27. But he dropped all of that to literally just go all in on being a startup founder. Even his girlfriend, he was like, I'm dropping my girlfriend. Bye. Moving all the way to New York. That's truly what exceptionalism is.
That is, that is. And so do you look for like when people are making these decisions and when you made the decision to take a gap year, because if you go the traditional route, you like graduate college, you have a stable job, and like eventually you work, you hopefully like your job, and then you eventually retire. And that's a conventional path. And people often don't, people who have a vision might put it to the side out of fear, which is like the fear of like doing something too risky. And so what would you say to someone to convince them to like it's okay to take the leap and to do like this entrepreneurial journey? And also, would you recommend that they do it concurrently with a conventional path? So like there are stories of entrepreneurs who've maintained their day job and also started their company and then quit their day job only when that company, like they knew it was going to work. So I guess a really big example would be like, have you heard of Monish Pabrai?
I have.
Yeah, so like he worked his day job while he was building his company, and then he only quit when he knew his investment fund was going to do it really well and that he could continue doing it. And then there are also people like Lucy Guo just dropped out of college completely to co-found Scale AI. And um,
Shout out Lucy.
so what would
She's
you say?
cool.
Have you met her?
I'm trying to.
Good luck.
My friend knows her.
Okay.
And I'm trying to. So hopefully, if someone's watching this in some point in my life, they come back on this conversation and be like, okay, now I've seen his interview with Lucy Gu.
I hope you get that interview. Fingers
Hopefully,
crossed.
one day. Yeah, she seemed cool. Not saying she is. Um, when I think about delusion, I think about people achieving success, right? Like it's this fancy dream of entrepreneurship. I think there's also like a level of romanticism that comes with it. Like, oh, I want to drop down, be a founder, yeah. But also like at the same time, you have to think about what is the most highest leverage thing you can do for your company at this point in time. And so if that's like dropping out of school to work a job so you can get more capital to put on that into your company so that company will still be afloat, that should be a priority. You have to think solely in terms of what your company and whatever your creative vision or your passion is. And you also have to understand the fact that you will probably not die if you do this thing, right? Like if you go and drop out for a year and do a gap year, like you won't die. You will live a great life. You probably live a much more fulfilling life just for you taking that risk. And I think that people are often too afraid of being uncomfortable. I think that uncomfortableness is defined by like, I don't know. In the media, it's known as like, especially in Gen Z, it's like, oh, can you go talk to a girl? Yeah, come with some. That's cool and all. Sure. But there's more, way more uncomfortable things you can do to really enrich your life and tell you and bring yourself out of your shell to do something that's much more impactful and much more, honestly, just like riveting, right? Much more interesting thing. And I think that the most, the people who laugh the hardest, the people that are the truly the kindest, the people that I've met who work the hardest, got bars right there for no reason, but I got bars. Um, they all go through these experiences and truly challenge themselves to be uncomfortable. And I think that is truly, if you want to be that person you admire, you have to do things that you've never been conspired of doing. I got bars again for no reason. Jeez.
That's a nice rhyme. I love it. Very catchy.
Yeah.
Um, so when you are like interviewing these founders, I've obviously asked you a lot of questions already. So when you're interviewing founders, what is one question that you always find yourself coming back to? And have you noticed like a surprising pattern in their answers?
Good question. I always love asking the question, what's the what is the worst piece of advice that you've ever received? Because advice is such like a contemporary thing. Everyone seeks advice, but all advice shouldn't isn't really even advice, right? Like if you're trying to do something that no one else has done before, okay, like live your life because no one else has lived your life before, like why would you seek advice? And I also think about that, like sure, mentorship is a great way to think about frameworking thinking, but at the end of the day, like you still have to live your life and you still have to do things that nobody else has done before because nobody else has been you before. And I think like I've definitely gotten advice and I've used that and it's helped me in certain ways. But what about the journey of like finding that for yourself, right? What about the journey? The journey is what matters, and like the work is the goal, is what people say. But what about like creating a thing that you never thought was possible? And so I think that that worst piece of advice question also comes into consideration when people talk about their journeys, especially if it's a journey that's very, very uncommon. There's one quote that I always have seen come out of that, and usually alludes to the quote of, if you know how the journey is going to go, you're living somebody else's life. Because you cannot know how the journey is going to go. It's going to have all twists and turns. Success is not linear. It's completely unlinear. It's not one straight function, unfortunately, not on the x-axis or y-axis. Um, but it is one journey, one path. And I think that that is one thing that really enlightens me and it really reinforces the idea that entrepreneurship is a mission. It's nothing else but a mission. And the greatest mission you can put yourself on if that's what you want to do with your life.
That's a great way to put it. I think like to the stipulation you added there, if that's what you want to do with your life, I think that's also very important because a lot of entrepreneurial content assumes that everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And like obviously for that audience, most likely yes, the people the content's reaching, yes, they do. But there are always people who like might get that content because they're interested in it, but their mission, like their life's mission, doesn't align with entrepreneurship. Or they might be an entrepreneur in a non-traditional sense. So like they might say become a doctor, but they might pioneer like a technology later on in life, like not in the typical sense of doing it when you're 20 in Silicon Valley without having like, like a job on the side or a family or a career. Um, you were speaking about like advice, and sometimes like how everyone is unique, and advice that worked for someone else can help you find your way, but ultimately you still have to find your way. So if you could time travel back to any age, I guess you can pick like what age would you like to time travel back and talk to yourself?
When can you start first realizing things? No, I had to live that. I had to live that. I always say this. I always think about this every single day. I really do think about like, oh, what I could be doing different if I went back to 16, if I went back to 16, that usually comes to mind. Usually 14 comes to mind. Um, I think also like 20 comes to mind sometimes because I feel like there's things I wish I would have known like a year ago. I always think that whenever you're, I think, I think 15, because I think I really do believe that middle school, if it's not a shitty experience for you, you didn't live a great middle school experience. I think everyone has a shitty middle school experience, and I think that's middle school and I usually sometimes high school, but like growing up as one of the only like South Asian brown folks in my high school slash middle school, there's like the one aspect of uh having a lack of community, isolation to say, and not having a lot of representativeness, a lot of like representation to say, and having that be found in the communities I was a part of. And I think that I didn't understand the power of representation and community until I started doing something that's bigger than myself, until I started building this platform. And I recognized that like truly community is such a pivotal aspect because the aspect of feeling cared for, the aspect of feeling like there's a community, like almost a safety net, even like emotional safety net, is so much more valuable when you're doing something that's so uncertain. And I think that that's something that I would have instilled in myself earlier. But at the same time, I think I recognize that at the best one in my life right now because I'm doing something that I've never done before, and it's also the riskiest thing I've done, the hardest thing I've done, and most importantly, the most impactful thing I've done. I want to say 14, I want to say 15, but I think I would pass it on to somebody else who maybe actually has a lot less life to live. Like I would give it to maybe my 85-year-old self, but I would hope that he does the same thing too, because he would have lived the life that he would have loved to live at any age.
That's very beautiful. And so if you could go back to like your 14 or 15-year-old self and your middle school self, what is something you wish you knew and what is something you would not tell yourself because you think you needed to learn it the hard way? And what is something you think everybody, like maybe something that you also went through, needs to learn the hard way?
You just have to eat a lot of dirt. You just gonna have to go through it, and you have to literally understand the fact that it is not going to be an easy road for you. But every single stepping stone, every single hardship you take, one day you're gonna recognize that and be like, wow, I'm so grateful that I had this. Because the people that truly impact the most people, the people that truly lead generational lives are not the people that had it the easiest. They're the people that were the weirdos, the people with people who were picked on, the immigrants, the people who were not the people that fit in. And they were the people who truly made it in life. For example, I mean, Elon Musk literally has high functioning autism. And most people look at them like that guy. I mean, when Elon Musk was going through high school and he was unable to socialize with his friends, you think he understood like why the heck was I unable to socialize with my friends? No, he felt bad about it. He was like, damn, why can't I do this? Why do I feel so out of breath? Like, why can't I do X, Y, and Z? But 40 years later, he's the most influential man in the world, if not one of the most influential men in the world, or people to say. Do you think people knew why a great example is my Angela. Why was she picked on when she was a kid? Why was she treated the way she was in ways that are so explicit I can't even describe them on this podcast? Why was she treated that way? But she people like me, I read about her story. And it inspires me to be a better person. Millions of people have read our story, and it teaches them to be better, teaches them to treat people with more dignity, more kindness. And so recognize that every single hardship you go through is not a hardship, it's a lesson to becoming the best version of you. And the best version of you will be remembered as the best image of you, because that is the you that will outlive you for decades, for eons to come.
That's I don't know what to say to that. That's a very profound thing. I give you these questions and like sometimes you just drop 6, 7 and now you're giving like really philosophical life advice. I can't keep up.
That's why like people are like, how do you hang out with this guy? Like I'm high energy. I just try to be like the person I want to be.
I love that.
Literally, like I try
That's
to just be like everyone, that everything that I say I myself is. Damn.
it's very authentic. And I think like your your interviews and like the way you speak, I don't want to say stream of consciousness because that makes it sound like you're just yapping without an end. And it's not like you find a way to keep it very authentic and to say what you are thinking, but still reach your message. I think that's like the art of articulation and to a degree that very few people have learned and have practiced. And I mean, you've clearly like you've practiced it a lot and it shows.
Thank you. I try to.
So, speaking of advice, what is a piece of specifically entrepreneurial advice that's commonly shared in your interviews that you personally disagree with or you think it needs more nuance than people give it?
You do things for the reward, and that's the reason why you do it. I think genuinely, but I believe that, there is always a greater purpose that is untangible. And I think, yes, the effort, the reward is satisfaction, the reward is happiness that you get from the pursuit of X thing. But I think that the idea of that being like a calling, the uncertainty of you wanting to do that thing, regardless of you actually understanding that you want to do that thing, like delusion, it's a real thing. And I think that there's a level of delusion that comes from the reward, and there's a level of delusion that comes from your sense of altruism and things that you want to do for yourself. I think that the external reward is possible. It's not, I think the external reward is doable, but it's not sustainable because at some point in your life, you'll recognize the fact that the reward that you seek isn't as satisfactory as you want it to be. And you're left with this almost sense of emptiness. That's why there's people who literally live their entire lives and have a midlife crisis at 40 because they worked a job that they thought they loved and then they recognize the fact that they didn't actually want that job. And I think that most founders usually are the type A type of people that like chase something because they want to chase it. But there are other founders that either like don't put in a lot of nuance in it or just like do it because they want the clout, and I can see that. And there's like a level of clout that comes with it because you feel good when you get a lot of followers. You feel good when like you get a lot of money. You get, I don't know, a lot of success in X, Y, and Z metric. But there are things you can do that you enjoy doing without the level of success to them.
And I guess that's very important to like separate the reward and then like our mission. And I think like there's examples of founders like Vinay Hiremath. I think he was the one who made a
Yeah,
blog.
Vinay is the homie.
Yeah, good.
It's crazy to say. It's crazy to say that out loud because I literally read a story and I was like, wow, I read it and I got to meet him and shoot a video with him, which, you know, it's like a small thing, but it's like, gee, what the heck?
That's incredible.
Anyway,
Yeah. I mean, like I read his post and it was after seeing your interview, it was so candid. Like the way he said, like, okay, here's the facts. I did this entrepreneurial journey. I am now like I have more money than I know what to do with. And I still don't know what to do with myself and like my life. And I think that candidness is not something we have often in the media. It's always like I reached this metric. I like fulfilled this, and this checkbox, and now I move on to the next thing. But what if the next thing isn't the thing you want to do? And so, is there a certain time and like not time or age, I think the correct word is life stage because like someone could be going through the entrepreneurial life stage when they're 80 and someone could be doing it when they're 20. So what life
Yes.
have you noticed that most people will say that no, the conventional path is not for me and that I want to become an entrepreneur and I'm willing to take on the risk and the burden if it fails?
What age?
Life stage, not age.
Life stage, life stage. There's two. There's two. One is that it's when they're super young. They're either in their teens, 14, 15, 16, is usually like the ripe age. Ripe age is crazy to say. Usually the right age to say, after that extent. Um, and they recognize the fact that they are either so disillusioned, so unmotivated by what's in front of them, or they're so outcast from what they've done already in their lives, from pursuing X thing or just from being themselves or just living their life, that they want to pursue something else that they believe will one either show that those people that they're better than them, but two also they have a genuine interest in doing. Secondly, it's those people who are 45, 50, people who are in the middle age and after working these years of this lifestyle, investment banking, this corporate lifestyle. Maybe you have a kid or two, maybe you have a wife or a husband, a partner, and recognize that they've been living somebody else's life and have only one life to live after working this entire corporate journey or whatever X job journey, and decide to go all in and creating this company no matter what. Usually, these people who are much older end up making companies that are much less risk averse, are much more risk averse. They're less open to taking risks when they're older because they have more to provide for it and just less appetite. But those people typically know industries, know a lot more, and are typically just able to create companies that are more profitable in the long run. So venture capitalists love talking to these people. But the group they love talking to the most are young people. The people that have a chip on their shoulder, one, two, three, whatever, six, seven chips, whatever, because they have so much they have so much energy, they have so much life, they have so much ambition and hunger to burn, to prove themselves right, to prove the world wrong, and to prove themselves, most importantly, to be the right person. And they're also the people who will do things in spite of anyone telling them to do them. Um, and generally just like will tackle more ambitious ideas. They'll tackle the billion-dollar ideas and fail miserably and horribly, but they'll get up and do it all over again. I think like a 45-year-old founder will make like a 200, $300 million company, sometimes a billion, but like these founders who are started 16, 17, a very small margin of them, and making it to the billion or $10 billion range. But both of them are delusional.
That makes sense. I think like it's essentially the same motivation but different methods of executing it. So like people who I guess what you're trying to say is that people who start their entrepreneurial journey later in life, after they've had a traditional work sense and have more responsibilities, they might take a less risky, more structured approach, but that they generally have like higher financial success in the short term, at least.
As an average, the median, I think the medians are the same. I think medians between young people and older folks have the same valuation of companies to say. They typically are the most successful monetarily. But I think that if you take the average of these two, you will see more success in the older founders because they will produce a higher net margin of successful companies that make it maybe like past the 10 to $100 million valuation range. But the most ambitious founders that make the most ambitious companies and the most generational companies all start when they're young. And they start when they're 16, 17, very before the age of 25, like to say, because that's when your prefrontal cortex isn't developed fully. You don't think mention it. Although I do see founders who start after, but it's very uncommon for them too.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think the part about the prefrontal cortex is definitely, it's true though,
It's
because
not scientifically valid, but I think it's like it is something that it is valid to say
no, I mean scientifically it is true. So
in some ways, yes. Yeah, yeah.
in part, I guess it doesn't mean that until the age of 25, we're all like not conscious beings, but it does mean that
Yeah.
there's, but it says so much about the potential because like even now you're only 21, there's still like 4 years. And that's like, right? So over 1,000 days. And in those 4 years, the experiences you have and like the motivations and your actions and your circumstances will like shape who you are for life. While that part of they will continue. I mean, even when you're 40, they'll still happen. But like at this age, around this time, like when you're 80, something that happened or something that you did today might influence you then. And I mean, that's crazy.
Mm, that is.
Yeah. So you were also talking about like people who might have 6 or 7 chips on their shoulder. So
Yes.
it's kind of like the saying no publicity is bad publicity. Does the same apply to motivation? Or no, like no motivation is bad motivation if you're accomplishing a good end goal? And also, out of the people you've seen succeed, if they could only have discipline or they could only have motivation, which one would you bet your money on?
I bet my money on.
Like
Answer your
your
first question.
personal retirement savings.
My band, all of them. Yeah. Question. Answer the first one first. I think that the common theme you said that was the
Oh, sorry, not common theme, like the means that lead us to take
news that
entrepreneurial
make it.
actions, like the motivation essentially. And like, is the motivation like different versus like if it's a positive
Mm.
motivation, like I want to work towards something, or a negative motivation, like I want to disprove this person, how does that impact our work and like our like mental and physical health?
I think the most successful people in the actually not the most successful, the most hardworking people in the world that truly work the hardest have the biggest chip on their shoulder because they have utilized all of the negative emotions and channel them into positive outcomes. A great example is David Goggins. A great example. He lived a horrible life growing up. His dad was he owned a brothel. Don't Google that, kids. Uh, but needless to say, it isn't great when your dad is a brothel owner. He repeatedly uh, domestically abused his mother, or David Goggins, his mother, repeatedly, and also beat him senselessly multiple times to the point where he would have to cover himself with big jackets and the bruises he got going to school, just so people wouldn't recognize, oh, what happened with you, just so he could cover everything up. Now at 48 years old, he's in the shape of a 28-year-old. He's he's the one person that I feel has the closest delta between their actions and their words. They say everything that they actually believe in, and they just do not stop. This guy, like people read about a story, but he's the exact same. Like he actually will do what he does, and that's probably the biggest inspiration for me because he has such a level of purposeful grind, and he's exactly who he says he is. But he's such a kind and truthful person that nobody else has I've seen them before. And so I think the hardworking people, not the most successful people, do channel the most have the hardest of lives, to channel the hardest of work to achieve, the hardest of emotions, the most negative emotions, to have the best of outcomes, the positive outcomes. Because David is able to use his negative outcomes to channel them into positive impacts, right? David has probably changed millions of people's lives. He's changed my life for sure. I would not be where I am today without David Goggins. And so I think that delta between, oh, your negative emotions and your positive outcomes, if you're able to utilize them and make them as wide as possible from the most negative to the most positive, that's where I think the highest success comes from and the highest satisfaction in your life. And I think yes, like people have a different and the chip on their shoulder and different senses of motivation, but I do think that someone who wins does not see the immediate value and why they won, and someone who loses always sees the immediate value and the immediate reasons about why they lost. I think that's the most important difference is that you will never know why you won. You'll always know why you lost. You always be like, "Oh, I won. I did this. I gained X amount of followers. I got this money." But why? You don't really know why. You assume it's because you did this. Your boy could just giving you a referral. He could invest in a you know. But when you lose, it's like, shit. I do wrong. Where did I mess up here? Let me go to my thing. Who did? So,
That's a really good way to put it, I think. And like that point about not like you always know why you lost, but you don't always know why you win is so true. And like even if you go back to, I guess it's because I'm in high school now, but like those like high school competitions, like are you familiar with DECA?
yes, yes. I never did any high school clubs except this thing called Friendship Foundation, which is a friendship club, which is like best buddies, the equivalent of best buddies. That's it. But I am very familiar with DECA. There are too many DECA kids at Berkeley.
Okay. Yeah, so like even in DECA when you do well on a role play, like at competition, um, you don't really know. Like the judge feedback will be like, okay, this is like one thing you could like you did well and like one thing like you could maybe do better on. And when you don't do so well, it's kind of easier to see like, oh, I know I wasn't very articulate, or I know like my ideas weren't resonating with the audience that I was presenting to. But when we do well, I think we focus more on the outcome than like the thought that went into it. Whereas it's only when we do badly that we focus less on the outcome and more about the steps leading up because we don't like the outcome and we want to like go back in a way, change the steps and then change the outcome.
That's why I think this is a very controversial belief of mine, but I think you should never celebrate your wins because you didn't learn anything from them. I think you should celebrate failures more often. I think when I have failed multiple times, I'm like, whoa, like this was a good failure. I learned a lot from this. I remember like the first time that I posted my first 100 videos. I've made over 1,000 videos in my lifetime as a creator. Over 1,000 videos. I posted over 100 videos. None of them crossed 500 views. They were pretty shit videos. Pretty bad videos. Sorry. But I'm now celebrating that 100 videos and the fact that I went and did those 100 videos and still kept going, learning every single step of the way and trusting the process with the utmost rigor in the way that I was creating this content that I think no one else uh, would have seen at the moment. But the fact that I had continued seeing that and still trusted it uh, was great. What was a very it was a very it was very celebratory. It was very something to be celebrated, at least now.
So do you celebrate them retroactively almost?
Yeah, like I had 10K followers on Sunday. My friend, like he bought me he spent like $15 on like an ice cream sandwich. I still don't get why he spent $15 on ice cream sandwich. Like, dude, I don't really care. But he was like, yeah, I'm gonna get you this, and I'm like, dude, you don't have to. He really was like that. But he had done that, and like when I had one other thing, I was like, oh, it's just another thing. Like I'm gonna keep going. Like maybe get when I get to like 100K. Um, and then like retroactively, like yes, I would celebrate it. But at the same time, like I just don't believe there's like an endpoint. There should never be an endpoint. Like these are just like sure milestones, but I don't think like even like milestones assume that there is a checkpoint, and a checkpoint assumes that there is an end because you keep checking toward the destination. But the goal is not the destination; it's a journey. And most important, the company.
Well, first of all, congrats on 10K. That's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure your friend had the best of intentions when he brought you an ice
He
cream.
does. He does. He does. Yeah, he's a great guy. But I know. I mean, I do the same. When we celebrated him for his birthday. Like we showed up. I broke into his house. We literally broke into his house to celebrate him and his girlfriend for his birthday. And he was like brushing his teeth, and we fed him cake after he brushed his teeth. But
Well, I'm sure he still appreciates it. And so
hopefully.
Another question I have for you is you are an entrepreneur while simultaneously being a content creator about entrepreneurship. And so in some ways you are the participant. Like you are the like what your work fits the profile of someone you might interview, but you are the one doing.
Correct.
So how do you balance being the observer versus being the participant? One inform the other in ways that you maybe wouldn't expect it to.
Um, a great example is church or not church. Like, I'm doing church because most people know church, but you temple, you can do whatever like religious construct that you're a part of if you are a part of one. You admire the word of God. You celebrate it. You celebrate the gospel, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever it is. You celebrate that word, and you apply that same intuition. You retroactively think about the same intuition and those lessons that you've learned when you go through your own journey, right? You're like, oh my gosh, like remember when Krishna did X, Y, and Z? He's facing this hardship. I'm facing the same hardship too. And you think about that. You're like, oh, wow, I'm going through this. In the exact same way, I think my interviewing and my entrepreneurship is the exact same because I get to meet the person and the amalgamation of their journey from whatever X amount of years they've been an entrepreneur and whatever success they achieved from there. And I've seen their story, same as the same stories you see in the Bhagavad Gita. Um, and you see them in your own life, right? In my life as an entrepreneur and doing the things that I do in my content creation. Um, and there's almost like a resonance back to like our delta example. The delta between like your lesson and their lesson is closer. Maybe it's closer, maybe it's larger than you thought, but there's a resonance there. You think about it like, well, maybe that lesson's the same. Maybe that's the same. There. At the end of the day, like your journey is still your journey, and you hear about these things. You hear about this example, and you're like, this example in like the Bible or whatever, and you're like, oh, how does this relate to me? It does. It shows up. Like there's an example where like, for example, I said, you either you shit or you get off the toilet. Apologies for my language, but you have to end up doing the thing or you don't do it at all. And that common theme, theatrics and the theology, the theme of that is evident in everything we do in our lives. And so I think there's always meaning to extract from things. Don't be too into it. Don't be too over intuitive because then you end up like not taking action and not really focusing. But there is a value to be learned in uncomfortable conversations and conversations that challenge you to think differently because you're one uncomfortable conversation away from changing your life.
That's very motivating. And I have a follow-up question actually about something I heard on another podcast. Are you familiar with the Diary of a CEO?
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
in one episode, he interviewed Evie Pomporas, and she was an ex-Secret Service agent. And in that
yeah,
episode,
yeah.
she talked about instrumental versus identity, like where instrumentals where we're focused on. She also talked about she's Greek, so she tied it to like kinesis and like always being in motion, in momentum towards our goal. And so, do you think that like there's a difference between people who are always focused on what's the next thing? Like you said, I don't really celebrate my wins because I don't think there's an endpoint. Like you're always in motion towards something versus people who are more identity, where it's like, I did this, I feel this way, I think this, but it's less action driven. And how would you encourage someone who's maybe being more identity to transition into being more instrumental and actually working towards those goals?
And by identity, this is like your goal, your life is like,
Ego almost. Like rather than
mm,
what can I do, what have I done, or like what will I do, it's more about like who am I or like what am I feeling? Or
the
like
id and the super ego, and then like, the middle is the ego. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see
yeah,
what you mean.
almost Freudian,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I took a FP Psych. I'm part of that. Yeah, I know you, Mrs. My teacher's name was Miss Freeman. Remember her. I think a lot of examples that people give out where you have this like you're in this like catharsis like state where it's like, oh my gosh, like I did this thing, and like everyone looks at me and like their life changes and it's like, oh, I'm not now just a different person. No, I talk to people who their most impactful conversation wasn't actually, or what this most impactful thought, that realization wasn't even from like a conversation. And so I think that like the identity, like the ego side of things, where you think of things and you're like, oh, I wish I would have done this, or like I want to do this, like this thing. It makes sense, and it comes back to our conversation about like external and internal motivation, right? Like, oh, I like this thing. It, it it's this thing that makes me look cool. But at the end of the day, like the people who end their lives on the deathbed, that the most satisfied, that lived the greatest life, did not care about the destination, they care about the journey, which is so simple to say. But if you live every single life thinking about what are the things that I could have done differently, and you live about things that I wish I had completed differently, you won't actually live a journey. You live a journey of milestones. You live a journey of like optimizing for theatrics. And it's like, what the heck is, why would you optimize for theatrics? Like, everyone's gonna die. And so I feel like you can, you can optimize for, I think I say optimize a lot because like you always want the highest reward from your action. I think a very big thing in Silicon Valley is like you are doing the highest leverage thing at the highest leverage time and the highest leverage point in your life, which is when you're young, doing this X one thing. But you also have to understand like you your gut, the equation for filling your the equation. I was the mathematician. The end result of feeling the most satisfied and the most accomplished with your life and with your action that you did is doing the most uncomfortable thing in the most comfortable time and having the delta between your action and your thought be the closest it can be at that point. I think that's something we should strive for.
That makes sense. In a way, like it's almost what we would conventionally define as a reliable person. It's like someone who says they're going to do X, Y, and Z by this time, and they do follow
Mhm.
up. They do it on that timeline, and they deliver to not only like checking off the box, but also quality and going above and beyond. So, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. I want to pivot a little bit to asking about your content. So, you create across like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and you share like the similar message, but each platform and each audience is very different. So, how do you
Yeah,
think distributing that message across different platforms?
I think if you remain, I think I'm interpreted differently on different platforms, mainly because like people just have a different sphere of perception of you when you're on a different platform. Like YouTube, you're there for more more story driven, more lower intensity, lower in lower stimulation videos. Instagram is the a mix between TikTok where it's high stimulation, high editing, but very low educational, low low growth content, right? You have the most stupidest of videos on TikTok. You got like the most brain rotted videos. YouTube maybe is like in the middle because it optimizes more for like long form videos and more storytelling and more interesting um, concepts. And then Instagram is the middle of that. And so I feel like naturally because of that, I'll have three different audiences that know me in different ways because their perception just coming into the app is mentally in a different state, right? The guy on TikTok can be like, oh, this guy, he's talking about 6'7". I'm gonna come at 6'7". No one on Instagram's coming from that. No one on YouTube's coming from that. But because his perception of this creator on this app that I know is his brain rot app and the app that I go when I'm on the toilet because I don't know what I'm gonna do and I just want to de-stress after I've done this and this and this and just want to watch some dumb videos. I'm gonna perceive this person in this light that I've already conceived of this app. So yeah, but I think it's also because like people just follow different people, and like I think their algorithms are much more optimized for different things. Like Instagram likes a lot more, cares a lot more about the individual creator and building a brand. YouTube cares a lot more about retention, and TikTok cares more so about engagement, like actually engaging with the posts, like comments, shares, likes. And once you recognize what's the highest level thing for you to do with this, the very specific, the highest level thing you can do for the very specific platform you're on then you continue to grow. But I always think that you should focus on one platform. I used to focus on LinkedIn. I grew on LinkedIn, and now I recognize I don't like LinkedIn anymore. So I put it to Instagram, and now I'm doing great on Instagram. I'm going really great. Um, and I'm able to still achieve and still reach a lot of people and grow at a faster rate just on a different platform. But optimize for one.
That makes sense. Yeah. And so like would you say you have a favorite platform or a platform where most of your content without you like having to tailor it too much is innately suited for?
Instagram. It has to be Instagram. When I get recognized like on the street, which is always crazy. Like today we got recognized by somebody who there's a gentleman who recognized me. He was like, "Yeah, like Brian Kim was at my portfolio company before at my previous company." I was like, dude, you're really like an entrepreneur who got funded by A16Z, and you're like talking to this 21-year-old who got a 2.9 GPA in high school, and you're like, "Oh my God, it's this kid." Like, what did I do? Like, I'm not nobody crazy, but like people recognize me. Like that's just the fact that I'm perceived. And so I feel like in that same way, there's one platform that I know I'm optimized for, and I know I'm seeing the most results from, and I enjoy that platform the most. And I think that's the decision to make. I think creators in general don't succeed because they have too little motivation. That's one thing, of course, inaction, but rather also the paralysis from having too many options, the analysis paralysis to say, and optimizing for too many things as opposed to optimizing solely on one thing. I'm optimizing for short form video content with entrepreneurs around Silicon Valley on Instagram Reels, and I'm growing great from that. It's the highest leverage thing I can probably do right now, one of the highest leverage things, and it's working out. I'm building a great brand that I think nobody else has done before, or not. I think that nobody else has done before.
That's really great that you have like a very specific audience and people don't always like consider or are as interested in the logistics again, like the how. And so the fact that you know your message and like who it's for, but also how you're going to get it to the people it's for, shows that you're very thoughtful about everything you do. So even like though your interviews might seem like they're short form content and they're done at a very fast pace, there's a lot of thought and a lot of like care that goes into them. And so
Yeah,
I think
I
with
try to.
yeah, you definitely it shows. It shows. And so for our closing remarks, what is so if there's anything like else you'd want to share about yourself, feel free. Do you? Or
Do you have another question after this, or this is the last question?
I have one question last. Like
Okay,
if
but I don't have anything else to say other than thank you. But I'm very excited here for the next question. That's what I'm really excited for.
okay, so my last question is if all of our listeners could focus in the next year, I know we're not quite to the new year, but it is coming up. Focus on developing one skill within themselves or like one habit that you think would impact their lives the most, whether like hopefully it is an entrepreneurial journey, whether that's in the traditional Silicon Valley sense or they're an entrepreneur in their like community or in their style of doing something. Um, what habit or skill or like trait would you encourage them to invest time and effort into cultivating?
Uncomfortable things. I think that as you get older, some people have the privilege of learning. Some people live their entire lives without figuring out what they want to do with their lives, and they die like that. And to me, like I don't. It sounds morbid to say, but it's so sad when I see people like haven't realized their life, and like you go to their funeral and like all they say is like Bob was a good person. He was a great guy. That's all they say. Like all you remember is just like they were a great person. You know that's not the truth. There was more potential. When you're on that you're in your heaven or hell, whatever you mostly believe in God. When you're in the afterlife, whatever, and you see every single version of yourself that ever could have been a thing. David Goggins said this. Are you the best version that you could have been? Are you the person that you were destined to be but never achieved that? And I always think about that. I'm like, man, like I want to be the best me, the most kindest, the most hardworking, the best Viraj I can be. And I also want to feel I want to be driving toward a mission that like is the hardest to do, but I still enjoy doing. and I know is the right feeling. I know in my heart the delta that I have, that it's the post that I have. So I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that that will come through having uncomfortable conversations and doing things that are hard, but doing them because you recognize that that is what will make the version of you that is destined to be the best version, the greatest version of you. That's it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think you've left it so that it's open to interpretation for whatever like a listener might want to do, whether like that's something academic or extracurricular or something completely new or a new sport or an instrument. But you've given them guidance. And I think a lot of what people you have to do sometimes is like what you said about just eating dirt. You just gotta embrace like the suck. Like it's just gonna be really bad
It's
sometimes.
really, really bad.
Yeah,
The
and
fast
like
life.
and it's okay. Like it's all the more fun because of it. Yeah. Like when I
Totally.
think of things that like have made me more hardworking, it's always the most high pressure things. And like in the moment, I mean, sure, like I want to go and just go to bed and not do any of it. But when I come out of it, it's like I did that. And I care less about the end result. Like I care about the end result only when I'm in the middle of it. And when I'm done, the only thing I remember is like what I learned or like what I did through it. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you so much for coming on today, Viraj. It was a lovely time to have a conversation with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge and your authentic, unfiltered thoughts, which I think, although we live in an age where a lot of times like content is aimed at like authenticity, it's really hard to like you said, close the delta between your social media personality and like who you are as a person. I think you're closer to that than you realize. And so thank you for being so
Thank
authentic.
you. I try to be. I try to be. And thank you for having me.